Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Amateur Repair Time. I am in the middle of about 5 different projects that I'm working on. I'm waiting on some parts, so I figured I would show off this RCA tube tester here today. I bought this probably a year ago or so from a gentleman who watches our channel from time to time. His father passed away and was a repairman. He liked to tinker with old radios and things like that. And so I bought a bunch of tubes from him, and I'm just showing you some of the stuff here in my office. And one of the things that he had was this cool tube tester, and he's been asking me to make a video about it, so I figured I would finally do it while we're waiting on parts for my other stuff. So I'm working on a Emerson tape deck. It's going all right. Kind of. I'm working on a General Electric radio. Waiting on a part for that. I've got a scope we're going to be working on. That's a projector that we already did a video on. We did a video on the record player. We did a video on the fan. We did a video on the Variac. The Zenith works. We did a video on that radio, that radio, and I think we did that one. I can't remember for sure. Radio, that clock, that clock, that clock. So we've got a bunch of stuff in here that we've already done videos on. And then here on the other side, I've got all kinds of projects that I'm going to be working on. We did a video on that, so that's a project that we're in the middle of. This is our beautiful Majestic radio. I love this thing. I can't wait till we get back into this. It's just an awesome machine. That's the one that we cut the new leg for. If you didn't see that, I'm probably going to be uploading those back up to this channel. And then the latest thing that we've been messing with is this Philco radio, the one that's got all of the issues with the wiring. So we're getting there. So I got the Philco radio, this Majestic radio, this clock. I believe that was an Ingram clock. It's 3. These are ones that are partial projects that I'm still working on. The Emerson tape player, the General Electric radio. This one's on the bench. This will be the next one as soon as I get my speaker in. But I figured since we're messing with this Philco, one of the things that we could do while we're waiting on the parts for the General Electric and the speaker for the Philco is we could test the tubes in the Philco, and we could use this tube tester. Now, if you are watching this channel, you probably know exactly what this thing is. Way back in the day, just for the sake of all of the childrens that are watching, way back in the day, if you had a television at home or a radio like this and it started acting up, it was really common that the problem may be one of the tubes is bad. So what people would do is they would pull the tubes out of their electronic equipment and then take it to the hardware store or take it to the department store, and there would be something like this there. Even in the grocery store, they would have them. And you would bring your tubes up and you'd look over the chart in the back, and then you would test your own tubes, and the thing would tell you, it would do a simple little check on it, and it would tell you if your tube's still good or if it's bad and needs to be replaced. If it needed to be replaced, you could have somebody open up the door on the bottom, and hopefully the correct tube would be inside of it that you could replace it with. I doubt they carried everything, but they probably had a pretty good selection. So whenever I bought all the stuff from Bob, this was sitting in the room, and his son was telling me that he remembered whenever he was a kid, his dad would have him help test the tubes on this thing, and so he wanted to see a video of it in action. So I've got it here in my office. I just think it's really cool little piece of electronic history, or if you're into electronics, a cool little piece of that whole thing. and maybe we can just see how the thing's made and test it out a little bit and see if it'll test something. Now, if you are going to work on radios and stuff, this isn't really the type of tester that you want to use, because it's not super accurate, and it's just going to give you kind of a rough idea of if the tube's good or bad. If it says the tube is good, you still might have problems with it, and so that's that, right? So it's not the greatest tube tester in the world, but it was a good way to give them a quick test at your grocery store or department store. So it's got a whole ton of sockets on it. 86 sockets, and then it's even got some of the really old ones down here. And then this will test a battery, battery tester pins, battery switch. So we'll see if we can test all that stuff. And it's got a little meter here. And on the back of it, it had these panels that you could scroll through and find your tube, and they're still there, and they stay where they're supposed to be. And I think the top lights up, and this thing was designed, to basically try to convince you to buy RCA tubes. So I guess the distributor or whoever was involved with this would come around and fill it back up with RCA tubes as they sold things out of it. So it says, manufactured by Seco Electronics, which is a division of, what in the world does that say? Diacro Corp. Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. Whatever that means. Now, it's two pieces. This whole top thing will come off. Or I thought, yeah. So this whole top thing will come off. It's just sitting on the cabinet. Right? Now when I got it, I think the lock was missing, or the door was shut or something, so I was able to put a new lock on it. It's very similar to the locks on a lot of arcade games, so that was easy for me. And then inside of it, there are 3 drawers and then some storage space at the bottom. So a lot of the tubes that I've got in here are tubes that that Bob had in his Radio Shack. So it's got a ton of old tubes. Now, some of these are used, obviously, and wouldn't have been available in the store. So in the bottom drawer, a lot of the tubes would have been these larger ones. Like this says 6D6. If you take the tube out and look in the drawer underneath it, it says 6DQ6. So basically you would look through and find your tube, and if it wasn't there, there would be a open spot. Like this one says, I can't even hardly read it, 6DQ5. And that says 6DQ5, yeah. So if you saw the open spot, somebody else already bought your tube and you got to come back. Bob had a bunch of light bulbs in his collection too, so some of those are in here. Philips Argenta. You don't see stuff like that all the time. All right, so the bigger tubes in the bottom. It says, check new tubes before sailing. And you can see how there's an empty spot down below. Now, what I've been trying to do, I've gotten all kinds of tubes, and you get them all the time in the box, is I've been trying to, if I get some in and they just happen to be RCA, see if I need them in this case. Oh, another thing, on the edge, usually they don't have a number. So you can put just doubles and stuff like that there. If you can do it without screwing up the box. All this stuff's not getting any newer. It's not, most of them aren't super valuable, but so this is a 35 Z5 GT. And underneath it says 35Z5, so that one's in the right spot. So it'd be cool if I had the whole setup as RCAs, right? So that's the middle drawer, which is kind of the medium-sized tubes. Tell me that's not a 35Z3. No, it's not. I needed a 35Z3 for that one. I think they're smaller, actually. Maybe not. And so here is the top drawer. And you can see I've been trying to put them in the spot where they go. I've got a few used ones in the wrong spot and all of that, but I'm sure it got like that at the store too. And some of them are obviously different brands. So there's a lot of General Electric. There's some Sylvanias. What is it? That's a GE as well. Lindell, is that what that says? Lindell, and ITT, Raytheon. So I've just been filling it up as I get them in. Pretty cool. All right, so there are little leg levelers on the bottom of it, so you can adjust it so it sits straight against the wall. And like I mentioned, I think that's a light. I don't know if it works or not, though. Let me get the power cord out, and we'll plug it in and see if the light works. So I have plugged it in. There's a switch on the back of it, and it's humming, so there must be some kind of transformer in it. The light is not on, but that's because there's no light bulb in it. So I'll see if I can get a light bulb at work tomorrow. It runs from about here to about there. So it's going to be probably 18 inches. It's going to be the same as the bulbs that are in arcade games. I'm trying to think, do I have any of those here at the house? I don't think I do. But I'll get one of those tomorrow, and we'll see if we can get her lit up. But it's humming, and after it came on, this needle moved from down here up to the middle. And it says good in green. There's a question mark. It says replace, question mark, and it says shorts and merit. And it runs from 0 to 120 or 100 and I guess that would be 130. ETA, electronic tube analyzer. So over here on the side, you've got the little thing that appears to work with batteries. I just happen to have a battery right here. And it says, battery switch. Set switch to the battery voltage. Well, I guess in our case it would usually be 1.5, but you can do whatever you want. Touch battery terminals to test pins and read the meter. Well, let's say that one's bad. I think that one's a new battery, so maybe that ain't working very good. Let me move the needle to make sure we've got it right. Or maybe I'm shorting it the way I'm testing it. I don't know. Doesn't seem to be great for a D cell. Let's try another one here. I'm not impressed with the battery checker. But let's see about testing a tube. Let me just pick one here at random. I got a whole ton of them. See if I can find one that I can actually read what it is. Okay. This one says, I know you can't see all that great. This one says 6136. So in the United States, that's like a even though it's made in the USA. That's like a foreign number, basically. So 6136, foreign and industrial tube list. Did I even do that type? 61, yep, there it is. 5A15. Our light is nowhere near here. 6136, 5A15. And if you look up here, the first number is the socket, the second number is the selector, the third number is the load. 5A15. So we would take our 6136, put it in socket 5, turn the selector to A, turn the load to 15, and would you look at that? Says it's good. If I go this way, I guess that's testing for shorts. So that's the merit of it, and that's testing to see if it has shorts. That's interesting. Yeah, so it says that one's good. You can see it's, of course, heating up the heater. So that's another thing, is this thing's sitting here hot the whole time. I mean, it's got juice running through it the whole time that it's here. Kind of wild. All right, so let's get the ones out of the Philco radio, and we'll test them and see if they're good or if any of them need replaced. All right, so the first one is a 50L6. And it is, I wish I didn't have that shadow on there for you. 67D15. So I put it in 67. D, we're on 15. So we gotta wait for the filament to warm up and see if anything moves. So it's saying you should replace that one. But it's not saying that it has any shorts. Now, something I always wondered, what happens if you got the load wrong? Like, what happens if we turn this up to 25? 35, okay, yeah. So you gotta have that right or it's going to give you a wrong reading, obviously. All right, so that 50L6 is pretty freaking borderline. It's on 60 out of 130. I don't know, I guess you could say that it's at the question mark. Barely. So the 50L6 is questionable according to the meter. So let's do the next one. Well, we may be running into a problem with our plan here. This is a 35Z3. It's actually a 35Y4 that we made a 35Z3 by removing one of the pins. But it's not on the list. And it might be because it's the Loctol base. So, you know, these are a little different. So I hope not, because that's what all the other ones in the radio are. We might have to pull out our regular tube tester. But let me try the next one. Well, the next one is a 7A8, and luckily it does list it. And so it does do some Loctols at least. Freaking shadow. The light is in the worst possible spot. It's bolted to the wall. I can't move it. 7A8, 68G25. So I've put it in 68. G 25. Borderline, or you know, I guess it's good. It's barely good, isn't it? And it doesn't have any shorts. So that's the 7A8. All right, so 7B7. There we go. 68D35. So we're in 68. D35. Another weak one. Let's test for shorts. No shorts. I guess it's pretty common for radios to have halfway worn out tubes. I guess it's pretty common for anything to have halfway worn out tubes. It seems like once you mess with the test switch a little bit, it goes up a little bit, but so again, this isn't the perfect way to test these, but it would give you a general idea. I mean, if that thing tested that there was a short, then you'd know that you have to replace it. And then another thing that you'd have to think about, they may kind of want you to think that more of them are shorted than actually are. It would be interesting to see, like someone who really knows their stuff. Maybe they could take a good tester and test several, and then just see if this is set up in such a way that maybe with the load switch or something, there's less of a tolerance, so it's more likely for this to tell you your tube's bad than the high-end dynamic conductance tester or whatever it's called. Right? I've got several of those too. I mean, we can test it on another one, but yeah. So after sitting here, it has moved up into the good area. So maybe I just wasn't giving it long enough. Yeah, maybe you need to wait a minute. Okay, so I guess that one's good. So on to the next one. All right, so this one is a 7C6. Where are you? 7C6, 68A35. So we've got it in 68. Notice all of them are in 68. That must just be because it is what's wired for 7 volts to the heater. There must be a bunch of different windings on that transformer, or however they're doing it. 7C6. 68A35. And we were already on 35. So it says that one's good too. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so one thing I want to do is I got in a new old stock 35Z3. Well, that was the one though that we just looked and we couldn't do, wasn't it? Let me look again. I got 35Z4. I wonder if that's the same. I wonder if Z4 is like an updated version. Let me do some research and see if 35Z3 and 35Z4 are similar at all. All right, well, I figured out a way to get us some more light on it. Should have done that earlier. So I brought home a bulb from the shop that we use in arcade games. It's just a F15T8. Very common. It's in pretty much every arcade game. Fluorescent tube, and it must either not use a starter or there's a starter built into the fixture, so I didn't have to replace it. So it looks pretty good. It's yellowed, but I'm of the type where I like that. I mean, I think it looks old, and it's supposed to look old because it is old. But that makes it so much easier to see your lettering, which I guess is the point of it. So the last one that we didn't get to do was a 35Z3. I looked it up. 35Z4 and 35Z5 are nothing like 35Z3. They're not even similar. The only substitute is a 35Y4, and a 35Y4 has an extra pin on it, like I was saying. So it looks like they're, on all of the 7-volt ones, they're telling you to use socket 68 for the loctals. So that's just how it is. But, you know, if it's a 35, of course, it wouldn't use that socket. So the deal is 35Z3 and 35Y4 run off of 35 volts, but they have a Lockdle socket. And apparently they only did Lockdles for just a little while. And I guess by the time that they made this little tester or whatever, they were like, we're not going to make an entire socket just for two Lockdle tubes to test. If somebody comes up and they have those to test, they're just not going to be able to test them. They're just going to have to buy a replacement if they want one. So I'm going to look in the drawer and see if it had a spot for 35Z3 or 35Y4, but you weren't able to test it. So it'd be interesting to see that. Were they trying to sell you one and they kept one stocked even though you couldn't test it, or what the deal is? All right, so on the front of the cabinet, there's a couple stickers. It says, Regency Professional Two-Way Action Radio, Authorized Sales and Service Center. I've never heard of Regency. I'm not even completely sure what a two-way action radio is. I imagine it's like a walkie-talkie, as I would call it. And then it says, Browning Sales and Service Center, over half a century in electronics. So I wonder if Browning has anything to do with the name of what we're looking at here, the tester. Is that a Browning? Now, I mean, I know at the top it said manufactured by Seco Electronics. All right, so I'm gonna do a little research on the internet, on the interwebs, and see if I can find anybody else that's mentioning having this exact one. They're not super rare and they're not worth a bunch of money, but they are super cool. So I'm gonna look it up and just see if anybody else has pictures of one, and if they were all RCA. Maybe this Seco Electronics, whatever it is, made them, and you could get a different sign for the top depending on which ones you sold. That'd be interesting to see. So I'm gonna see if I can find any more of these that are very similar. All right, so for my first one here, I did find one that's a little different, but it's basically set up similar, made by the same company. And the interesting thing is they're from Lancaster, South Carolina, which is, I bought this in Charlotte. It's about 40 miles away. I drive through it every week whenever I go to Jefferson. So it's not far from here at all. That's where their plant was. I'd love to figure out where that plant was and see if it's still there, what it is now. Seco Electronics, I may be able to figure it out. This one's very similar. You got the board here of the sockets, and then the meter is a little different, but similar. And it doesn't have the battery thing. And this was used at an audio place, so they're talking about the heart and soul of your amp. And this particular one is missing the whatever the display was at the top. Here's one that looks just like the one we were just checking out a picture of, but it has the marquee on it. So looks like it's RCA as well. Maybe they had some kind of deal with RCA to provide the tubes, and they would provide the kiosk or whatever, and that's how they were shipped. So it's pretty cool. Here's another picture of one on Reddit. It's probably the same one if you look at the wear on the marquee. And it shows the drawers, and it looks like it's made just exactly the same. So the bottom part is probably the same. So I'm going to look up Browning. The only Browning I'm aware of, I was thinking, where have I heard that name? I'm not a huge gun guy. I don't have a bunch of guns or anything, although people I know do. You can probably figure that out. I have nothing against guns or anything. I just don't happen to be all that into it. But Browning is a famous gun manufacturer, but it's probably a completely different company. So this is some kind of Browning electronics company, but that's where I had heard that name before. It's the gun manufacturer. Electronics pioneer Glenn Browning put Winchester on the radio map. In its fingerprint factory in Washington, D.C., the FBI kept millions of fingerprints during World War II as the Bureau gathered information about suspected spies and saboteurs, draft dodgers, federal workers, and others. Because that list also included war material manufacturers, A small newspaper noticed that Officer John Murray fingerprinted employees of J.H. Wynn, Sons and Browning Laboratories in 1943, identifies these two Winchester businesses as producing products to help the military win the war. The Browning Laboratories was newer and smaller, just the sort of business the town planners wanted to attract during the early 20th century. A leader in the field of radio electronics, the Browning Company added to the luster of Winchester's reputation. The Winchester Company, a Radio Shack ad in the Boston Symphony Orchestra's 1954 program stated, "This Winchester Company is behaving in a manner to make New Englanders proud of their area's performance in technical and musical matters. When Iowa native Glenn Hazard Browning, who was born in 1897 and died in 1974, moved into his new home on Appalachian Road in 1926, his career was about to take off." They developed research to increase the efficiency of radio frequency transformers and developed a special mathematically designed tuned RF transformer, which was incorporated in a circuit known as the Browning-Drake circuit. This invention was an overnight success, and sales of a kit using the circuit reached into the millions. The Browning-Drake Company was one of the first companies to specialize in the manufacture of precision-built radio receivers. The company grew in size and added the Sylvester Garage across the street to its facilities. The building, dating to 1926, had included a lower-level auto repair garage and commercial main floor. Local architects designed alterations, including the larger vestibule in the northern corner. Here is an ad about a radio, apparently, and here's pictures of the factory. So apparently, a big radio company, and this was back in the 50s and stuff, and that thing, didn't that say a century in business or something like that? Well, the guy was born in 97, and that thing was 1970s something, I would assume. Maybe I read that wrong. Maybe it said 50 years. Well, anyway, I'm going to go look and see if I can see if it says the address in Lancaster, South Carolina, where that tester was supposedly made. And let me look at that Browning sign one more time. All right, it says over half a century in electronics, so 50 years. So that makes sense. Okay, and then the tag, I'm reminded, says Division of Diacro Corp., Minneapolis, Minnesota. So let's see if we can figure out when Diacro Corp. Bought Seco Electronics and where Seco Electronics was. All right, so it seems Seco, whatever, Electronics was at 2213 Industrial Park Road in Lancaster, South Carolina, back in the day. This is their headquarters. They're no longer there. Let's see what that's near in Lancaster. I'd be interested to see. It's 521. Oh, so this is Lancaster down here. It's north of Lancaster, almost up near Van Wyck, which honestly, it's pretty close. It's not far from my shop. That's interesting. They were a company, a part of Diacro Corp. Diacro Corp. The name of the company was changed to Diacro in 1958. In 1965, they owned as much as 22 companies. So they were buying up all kinds of companies, Diacro. Someone posted on a news group that he had two Seco Electronics tube testers that are about 2 feet square. It has a roll sheet on it. It sounds very similar to the ones that we've got. And he says that he got them out of a Radio Shack store. So they were in use in Radio Shack. So these may have been Radio Shack. This may have been a Radio Shack tester. I found this indexed to deeds. I didn't find the actual deed, but it says that Seco Electronics it says assignment of agreement from Dana Corporation in July or August of 1974. So there's some kind of agreement going on with Dana and Seco Electronics. found this listing. At one point, Dana Corporation, Warner Electric, and Seco Electronics were all in cahoots. And then finally on Amazon, I found this. There's a big old industrial DC drive made by Warner Electric, Seco Electronics Division, has the Dana logo on it, and it says 2213 Industrial Park Road, Lancaster, South Carolina. Now that location is some kind of place that makes and distributes parts for 4x4 vehicles. So that company is now out of business. So that's what that is. So it looks like the one I've got may have been made in Lancaster because the company was still in Lancaster years later. This was like the 80s here. So it could have been made right down the road. That's pretty cool to me. And if you're wondering what they're worth, here is one that is for sale on the Pittsburgh Craigslist right now. It's a slightly different version, but it's also branded RCA, and they want $180 for it, and it's working. So it's one of those things where they're not great testers. They're just kind of a nostalgia piece, and they take up a lot of room. But for me, I kind of needed something to help store some of my tubes in anyway, so why not? And I got a good place to display it in that corner, so I was happy to get it. All right, folks, so there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. I've been meaning to do a video kind of showing that off for a little while. Neat little tube tester. If I find another one, I'll probably buy it too. Just move these shelves back a little bit or something. I could put it right there. It would have to be a different type though. You know, I wouldn't want two of the same. That'd be just, I mean, why would I have two of the same thing? I mean, why would I you know, I don't go to extremes or anything. All right, so leave your comments below. Do you remember going to see these in the store? Your dad taking tubes in to try to test them? I never remember that. I was born in 78. This is a little bit before my time, but not much. Probably 5 years or so. A little bit earlier, I probably would have saw one. And I may have seen one and I just didn't realize it or something, but I have no memory of ever seeing this in the store. But I got my own now, so I'm happy for that. So I'll end this. I'm going to show you some pictures from when it was in Bob's Radio Shack at his house, so you can see it. So I'm happy to have it. It's working great, and we fixed the light bulb for you, Bob. See y'all in the next video.